I am Blair, and I guess I'm an independent musician, act. Um, I started playing when I was 16, coffee shops, and in New Orleans, kept playing, opening for people, and sort of went from there in New Orleans. I like indie pop. Originally, my stuff was a little more folk oriented. It was like more simple, but there's definitely like electric guitars involved now. So, sort of indie pop, rock, all those would work. I think there's a bit of you don't compromise as much. For instance, if someone came up to me and gave me a song that I heard and I knew it was like some radio hit song and told me to sing it, I wouldn't, because I want to. I think the thing about being an indie is just whatever that means anymore is being an individual, creating a sound, standing by it, and not going with the trends, waiting for something to notice that you're special. Finding fans, I don't know if it's really different for an indie artist than any other artist. The bottom line is people need to like the sound that's coming out of the monitors at your show or the CD. I think it's well, with the internet, it's easier to find fans like that. In fact, I think like it's the age of the fan right now. I mean, I'm a big music fan, and there's so many ways for me to find my favorite artists. You know, their interviews, their shows. So it's a great time for a fan. I think it's a difficult time for artists because there are so many artists out there. Honestly, the main obstacle would probably be economic. It's difficult to tour on your own. It costs money to promote a tour. You're sort of breaking even along the way, and you can't have a job while you're touring. So the numbers don't all add up. You know, it's so that's the biggest obstacle, I think, and also the way the music business is sort of deconstructing and building back up. All the rules, all the roles, you know, there's like a lot of phantom things around you. It's confusing sometimes, you know. I try just like as a person emotionally, I really like to play music live for people. So I try to make sure that that's where I like derive my joy. That's what I started doing. That's what I'm still doing, and that's what makes me happy. As far as economically, I think you now have to be willing to just go with the flow a little bit, you know, take more chances, take more risks. For instance, I moved to California because I was getting airplay and press there. In New Orleans, not so much because it's like very funk, jazz based. So I picked up and moved to California. You know, that's fairly a drastic thing to actually like move and do that, but if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. I think like press and getting like airplay on independent radio stations, whether they be like webcasts, podcasts. You know, I got press from NPR, that got my music out to a lot of people. You can do it on an individual basis. You know, you go on your tour, maybe you make 7 or 8 new fans in the crowd, or maybe like 2 people buy the CD. I think those. And then if more people come to your shows, obviously the ratio gets larger and larger. But I've found that my things have grown the most when I get national exposure via press and radio play. I would say to just put a lot of thought behind what you're creating. I think you have to be like really confident with that recording you're trying to promote or that live show that you have. If you're gonna put your effort and funds and all these things behind it, just before you go do that, make sure it's like the best thing it could, you know, that you could do at that time, because otherwise it'll just show that you don't think you're at your peak. You know what I mean? Like literally anyone can get a few instruments, get in a van, and book some shows. That isn't hard. Getting people to show up is hard. And getting people to buy your music is hard. And so those 2 things will happen if you have a really good product that you're behind. Well, I think a place that I've learned a lot of lessons is in the recording studio. Recording, even though there's a lot of like home options now, people can get Pro Tools, you can get things easier. Recording still costs money, mastering, mixing costs money, and what I've learned is when you're in the studio to have a very clear vision of what you want, not to have like 9 people in the room. That's something I really learned, because you can burn a lot of your funds that way if you don't think about it beforehand. One good step that I did make was I had this music and I liked it, and I liked what I was making, and I was playing local gigs in my my hometown, New Orleans. But it wasn't until I got like a publicist and decided to have a broader scheme and look at the national view of things and get professional, or not even like, I'm not a business person, but to just try and look at all aspects of it, to have a goal, to be like, oh, I want this at this time, and unless you start getting a publicist, manager, things like that, then you're not really looking at the big picture yet. I just started opening up for artists and playing for their crowds. So actually, if really like any big thing I would tell anyone is to play every gig you can, to open for anyone you can. It might seem like, oh, there are only this many people there tonight, or this isn't a big deal, but so many of my opportunities have come from just me showing up and playing music. And that's as simple as it's going to be. That's how artists are going to be able to survive, is the money from their merch and the road. There was someone bought my CD in New York, gave it to their girlfriend. Their girlfriend works on a movie set. Something came from that. So it's hard, but because you can't always see these things working while they're working. But if you show up to your gigs, you play a good gig. That's all you can do. It's like one little step at a time.
Just kind of perfecting each individual act along the way.
Yeah, you'll get overwhelmed if you look at it all. I mean, if you look at like how many CDs come out a week, or you hear about this label's falling, or people aren't signing people, or you don't need a label, like all these things can be very overwhelming for an artist when your job is, or what you like to do is really just play music in front of people, and you want it to be that simple. And in a way you can get your enjoyment out of it, out of being that simple. I hired someone as a publicist, and they had sort of gotten out of management, but they just, I might have gotten lucky, because my managers and lawyers just like my music and feel like something good will happen, and so they're sticking behind me. I didn't really have to go fishing for it too much. I felt good about it, about who they are, and it's sort of that simple. I have 2 people. They're like 50%, and whatever the dealings are, they each get 50%. And one of them is sort of like a day-to-day type thing. The other one just has more contacts because he's been in the business longer. So they sort of like balance out that end of it. I think typically, when everything is put together, your manager like talks to your booking agent and your label, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't have a booking agent or a label yet. So really what's happening now is my management is trying to help me get those things. Sort of looking at the big picture, seeing what's being done, what can be done, opportunities here, there. And I mean, and also I'm still like heavily involved in that too, and that aspect of it. Because I'm a solo artist, it's not like 5 people, or 4 guys in a garage, just each 25%. It's somewhat of like a one-woman show on my end, and I'm looking for things too. Yeah, like you can't just rely on the people who work for you. You have to like keep looking yourself. Blogs are, I think, they're like the new tastemakers. They're really just a bunch of music fans like sitting in their room telling people what they like. It's that simple. And some of them like really good music, and so with the like just so much music coming out. People can go to them and see their favorite 8 CDs of the month, and a lot of people take their advice from them. I think they're really important. I think they're really cool. I think it's great that what people are getting is from like real music fans, not necessarily like force fed by large labels. Yeah, and not just with indie. I mean, like I attach indie to what I'm doing because I feel silly like putting any name before what I'm doing. Like I don't know, it's just music, but really any music. It's just these blogs are just music fans telling people what they like. It's really important, and I think most of the time you don't have another option. Like if you don't do it yourself, no one's gonna do it for you. I book my own shows with my management, but if I had a booking agent, I wouldn't be booking my own shows. So there's a point, I try to stick as much as I can to just like making music, but I get feedback from like people in the business or even people doing business with me is I guess like you do as much as you can. You just keep building your project, you keep setting goals, you keep doing all that, and then someone might take notice and help you out. So I think like DIY is basically your only option right now. And, I mean, unless you get like picked up really early or